Let's continue the series of tips and tricks about macOS, this time the Finder and especially the desktop setup. Hi, I'm Chris, and today I want to talk about the macOS Finder and the desktop setup. Almost anyone who is using a Mac is using the default Finder settings, and I personally think that is not the best way to do it. Of course, everybody likes it their own way, and maybe these default settings are actually the default settings for a good reason, but I think I have a couple of ideas to offer that can improve the work with the Finder and the desktop. To demonstrate those, let's switch over to the screen. Now, as you can see, I have a couple of files on the screen right now. In most cases, my desktop is pretty clean and almost never has any files, except for those that I'm actually working on right now. I tend to keep the desktop clean and just have the most important stuff there, or the stuff that I'm actually working with right now. The other stuff has to move away, and I put it on external hard drives or into the folder structure where it actually belongs. But also you can see that this is not the standard setup. The standard setup looks much more like this. But what I've done there is that I actually went into the desktop show view settings, and those view settings are available if you go click on the desktop, actually click there, click on view, and then show view options. You can also hit Command and J. And what I did here is that I set the icon grid to 32. I think it's bigger in the normal system, like so. So I have set that to 32. And I have made the grid spacing the widest available, because if you make it smaller, it gets more squished down. I also changed the font size to 10 because I really have no problem with my eyesight, and I just like it to have more condensed into smaller form factor. And then I have made the label position to the right. And you might notice that there actually you get much more information than having it on the left or on the bottom. And I personally prefer the label position to the right because, as you can see here, the difference between the two is actually pretty significant, and I just feel it makes much more sense to have it on the right. Also, this show item info is by default not selected, but I think it makes so much sense to have more information about the files you have actually stored there, especially with hard drives where you can see how much space the drive itself has and how much space is available. With folders, you get the amount of items that are inside this folder. Pictures have the pixels available, and in videos, you get the length of the video. Last but not least, I have set the sort by to kind, which essentially sorts those items by kind. So hard drives are first, folders are second, and then you have pictures and videos, and then there's other documents. So this is basically the setup of the desktop. What this sort by setting also does is that it forces the files to be on the top right side of the screen. So I cannot move this item here. If I click here by sort by and say none, then I can position my files wherever I want, and then I can also have this sort by snap to grid, which makes those things snap to a grid, but that's not really convenient for me. I really like my stuff sorted by default, so I make it the sort by kind, and that way it's all up to the right side and then goes down. And once this column is full, it actually starts a new column to the left here. But there's more about this desktop. If you go to the Finder and then into Preferences, you actually have the setting show these items on the desktop. And there you have hard disks, external drives, CDs, DVDs, iPods and stuff like that, and connected servers. For a long time I had this hard disk enabled to also have the normal macOS hard drive on here. But just recently I started disabling this because it essentially means if I have no files and no external drives here, then I have a completely clean desktop, and I really like that. CDs, DVDs and iPods just make no sense at all on a normal MacBook because I don't have any CDs. The connected servers in the Finder I never use because I normally use the Sidebar client for servers. And that's pretty much it about the desktop. I really like the desktop this way because it actually is a very clean setup. It's completely clean if you have no external hard drives connected and you have all the files put away where they actually belong. I think it's a great way to condition yourself to have the desktop clean, because putting your files away actually means that they are where they belong. But these settings offer more, especially about the Finder itself. For example, we start here with the new Finder window shows. And by default, I think it's set to all my files. And I think maybe this is a very valid option for most people, but I just want my files to be where I want them to be, and I really never got used to this all my files thing, which essentially is all your files sorted by the last time you updated them or stuff like that. I really don't get that. I have my folder structures, I know where my files are, and if I want to find a file, then I can just use Alfred and hit Command and spacebar and then hit the spacebar again, and that way I can search for files very easily and I don't have to go into the Finder to do that. So I have it set to the home folder, which in my case is called C Spiegel, and I have set the open folders in tabs instead of new windows because I really hate having multiple Finder windows and I never understood why you wanted to have that. Next up, we have the tags, and I personally never got the tags. I very rarely use them to have some kind of status. For example, if I have this macOS Finder folder here, that is the project I'm working on right now doing this video, and I can do a right click and then make it red for recording, for example. So I am recording this one, and then once I'm done recording, I can take it and make it the orange for I have to edit this, and once I'm done editing I add the green button, but I never set these up for sorting or something like that. The sidebar, on the other hand, is something where I think most people don't pay enough attention. So I will open a Finder window, in this case this macOS Finder project file, which is basically the project I'm working on right now, and here you can see that I have a very clean sidebar, and I think the sidebar is a very valuable asset in the Finder, especially if you actually take care what is shown there. So for example, for me, I have my favorites up here. I actually took care to sort those things by the number of times I actually used them or by how it makes sense for me. We have the desktop at the top, then I have the cloud drive, which I very rarely use. I have my inbox, which essentially is all the files that I'm currently mostly using, project stuff and stuff like that. Then I have Google Drive, my application folder, where I have all the applications I am using. Then I have my personal home folder, which by default gets opened when I open a new Finder window. Then I have the downloads, and then I have the AirDrop, which essentially gives me the option to send files to other devices in my radius. Then I have the devices, which is the Mac here. Then I have the internal hard drives, remote disk, and external hard drives. What you can see here is that I have actually chosen not to have some things visible which are visible by default. For example, as just mentioned, all my files, I never use that, so I just have disabled that. Then I have this shared thing. It shows connected servers back to my Mac. I don't have another Mac, so I don't have that enabled. I have the Bonjour computers, so if there are any, I get to see them here. And then I have the devices, and there I actually have CDs, DVDs, and iPods, because sometimes if I have them connected, then I want to be able to access them, but I don't really need them on the desktop. And I actually disabled the tags because, as mentioned, I don't really use them, so I really don't need them in the Finder sidebar. One thing I think is very interesting is you can also add other folders to the favorites. So for example, if I would want to have this folder in my favorites, I just have to select it, drag it, and then I can put it into the Finder sidebar. So now I have this folder right here, so I can really access it quite fast. But I don't want this here. Obviously, it doesn't make any sense, so I just remove it again. Then the last setting we have in the Finder preferences is this advanced thing. The first setting here is show all filename extensions. I just think it makes sense to know what the filename extensions actually are. Then there is show warning before changing the filename extension or show warning before removing a file from iCloud. I don't think they are necessary. Maybe if you want to, you can have them enabled to be able to kind of get when you're doing something that might potentially remove a file from another device or change the filename extension, which could potentially mean that the file is not being able to be opened by the application it's intended for. Then I actually want a warning before emptying the trash, because sometimes that's not the best idea. And I want the Finder to actually clean out the files after 30 days, which basically never happens because I tend to clean the Finder trash myself. And then there's the keep folders on top when sorting by name. This would mean that if I sort this by name, that the folders are actually always at the top. So I have folders first and then this, and then I have the folders sorted by alphabet, and then I have the files sorted by alphabet. I personally do not like that, but you might like it very well. And one setting that I think is very important is this: when performing a search the current folder, because by default it's set to search this Mac, and I think that search this Mac is something, again, I do this with Alfred, just hit Command and spacebar and then the spacebar again. If you're not using Alfred but instead using Spotlight, then you can just start typing there and it automatically searches this Mac. So if I'm actually in the Finder and I'm, for example, I have this folder selected and I want to search something with Command F, then I actually want to search in this folder. If I want to search in another folder, then I can actually go here and have this selection, which is currently this folder, and I can make it this Mac. So then it actually searches the Mac itself. But I tend to only search in folders, so I have it to set to current folder by default. So that's it with the normal standard Finder preferences, but there's more hidden away in some menus. One thing I want to mention in this view is that I really like my screen real estate, and I have only added this for demonstration purposes because normally I never use these. Like, never. I don't use the share button, I don't use the label button, I search. Whenever I want to search something, I hit Command and F. I don't use these, so I just remove all of this, because once I am finished, let's check. Once I'm done, it actually becomes smaller, and then if I hit done, it's just smaller this way. Don't ever use the others, so I just have them disabled. What you might also notice is that this is the column view here right now, and by default it is set to this kind of icon view. What I just did is I hit Command and 1, and you can change those modes by Command and 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you have this kind of cover view. And I think it's the default to have this kind of icon view, and the Command 2 has more info about the file, and then you have Command 3 which is this column view. And I really like the column view because then I can really easily navigate with my keyboard. So I just can go up and down and left and right into folders. And that way I actually have the structure visible, which gives me a great opportunity to know where my files are and have an overview kind of situation. To have this as the default setting, you can again go into the preferences of this view option, which is in view, and then you go to view options, or you just hit Command and J. And this Command and J actually opens up this window right here, and there you have a setting where you can make this the default screen. So if I open the icon view, I can make it always open in icon view, but I want to have it always open in column view, and obviously browse in column view as well. And then I have the view options arrange by and sort by. Those essentially mean that those files are actually sorted by name right now. I can also sort them by file size, date modified, and other options. And then I have the arrange by, which if I set this to kind, then you will notice that there is folders, and then you have the folders sorted by name, and then you have the others, which in this case is just those two others. If there are more pictures, then it would actually have a pictures area and a videos area. But in this case, it's just one file of each, so it brings them together in one section called others. I don't use that, so I just have it set to none. And lastly, we have the text size here, and I have that at the default of 12 pixels because I think the 10 is just kind of small right there. And then we have the show icon and show icon preview. Those actually, I think, are much more useful if you actually have them activated. And I have the show preview column, which essentially is this second column if I go into one of those files, where I actually can see the file name, file size, created, and all the things about this file. This is basically all I wanted to say about the Finder settings. You have other options as well in this view menu, where you, for example, can disable the sidebar. You can hide the toolbar, which automatically also hides the sidebar. You can hide the path, which is shown at the bottom here. You can hide the tab bar, but it's kind of confusing once you open a tab that it comes back. And then we have the hide status bar, which is this lower bar here, which I think is also very useful because there you can see how many files are in this folder and how many files you have selected. A couple last features here is that if you want to rename a file, you can just select it and you hit enter, and then you automatically are there to rename the file, excluding the file extension. If you actually want to change the file extension, you can obviously do this by just moving the cursor around. If you want to open a file in a program, you can easily do Command and arrow down. This would open the file automatically. If you do the same thing with a folder in column view, actually nothing will happen. If you do the same thing in icon view, then you actually navigate into this folder. And then of course there's Spacebar Preview, which was added to macOS a couple years ago, and it's one of those features I miss most whenever I'm in front of a Windows computer. And it's essentially just the ability to hit the spacebar and it automatically will show you a preview of the thing that you have selected. So for example, in case of videos, you actually see the video and you can play it back, and you have navigation options down here at the bottom. With pictures, you just see the picture. With folders, you see how big the folder is and how many files there are. And the great thing is that many applications actually offer this. If they have specific files that have a specific ending, then they are also able to have this spacebar preview, which is pretty amazing. The same thing works with Word documents, it works with PDF files, it works with many files, and I find it very, very useful. Now this is it about the desktop and the Finder in macOS. I hope this was valuable for you, and please let me know in the comments down below what other techniques or tricks you know in the Finder. Share this video if you know someone who has a Mac but is not using the full potential of the Finder. Give this video a like so I know better what you find useful, and subscribe to this channel for more daily videos like this. I will see you tomorrow in the next video. Until then, stay awesome.